Hi, I'm Julia with the Office of Historic Alexandria, and this evening I'm here with Dr. Benjamin Fiore Walker, the Senior Director for the Opportunity and Inclusion Center at the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education. But we're really here to talk about your other job, which is the Alexandria Town Crier. So yes, tell us a little bit about what a town crier does.
My job is to introduce the crowd to Alexandria, and usually it's before a large event like a birthday or a parade or something. It's kind of the opening act to get people ready and riled up, and then I turn it over to the rest of the event.
What made you want to sort of pursue this?
I've always been a fan of history. I'm not a historian, but when I was little, my mom taught me saying, so if you want to learn history, she said, don't try to just remember the dates and places. That's really sterile, and it's just kind of boring. She said, think about the people that were there and the story of their lives and what they were going through, and try to imagine that. And then if you do that, then the who, what, where, when's all come. Who are you talking about? These people, or what time frame? Oh, it's this. And then you start talking about the sequences of things that are happening, and that kind of is the storytelling aspect of it. And so I always thought of that, and so when I moved here to Alexandria, being a docent at Gatsby's and just telling the history of the building, and then I kind of did tours of Alexandria on a pedicab. So visitors came, I just rode them around and pointed out things. So it's like a walking tour that didn't have to walk.
I love that.
Yeah, and then, so I was always kind of interested in it. And then when they had the press release went out, I had two friends, one that worked for the city and one that was with the Christmas Revels, the performing group. They received the press release, and they sent it to me. They forwarded the email to me, like one after the other. My email went off, and they said, you have to do this. And I was like, okay, what's a town crier? I know, So I looked it up, and then I said, oh, that sounds like kind of like fun. And I went and I won the competition.
Awesome.
Okay.
So it was like an audition process?
It was a cry-off. Yeah. So we had a common cry that we all, and it was here in this building, actually. It was a common cry that we did in front of the judges and cameras, and they had a decimeter where they were measuring the strength of her voice, and then we had the opportunity to write a personal cry or a creative cry. So I decided to write it in rhyming scheme, and just because it seemed easier to write, and I did that, and then they filmed it and they put it on the internet, and people could vote. So it was on the city's website. People could vote. And that was like the 7th judge.
So, oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a whole big thing. It was a lot of fun.
That sounds like so much fun, especially because you are already seem so passionate. You are passionate about like teaching the past and being able to do it in such a creative, sort of non-traditional kind of way. That's so inspiring. Like the new way, another way of thinking about it.
I was a college professor, so it's edutainment, right? So you're just on the stage and you're talking about something, and if they're enjoying themselves, and then they may learn something, and then it's all kind of built into it. So it's kind of a lot of that. It's standing and talking about people, or talking to people about Alexandria, and then just chatting with them about what I do. And
do you think, and as a sort of extension of this, as someone who is doing history education and supporting all kinds of other aspects of education, how history is important or a component of a STEM-based education?
You use the process, I guess. You're studying what happened, and you're trying to piece together, an event. Because we weren't, some events we weren't there. Right, and we just have what people wrote about it or what they said about it, and then what you're trying to do is kind of infer what was happening and so on. So it's not quite the same. Unless it crosses some sort of invention, like Ben Franklin is inventing everything. but you're still kind of using that inference, and you're using the scientific method of thinking, of how to assemble the story that went on based on the evidence that you have. So, I mean, that's, I think, the closest I can do. I think they're different enough so one is a break from the other. So, I mean, doing town crier stuff is completely different than when I do the rest of my job. So it's almost a different person. It's a different persona that I can take on and do and not worry about all the things that are going on in the modern world. Like I'm talking about, the event, or I'm talking about history, or I'm talking about, something. So it's a lot of that break from the other things that I'm doing.
Is there, do people from your day job come to see any of your sort of performances?
But a lot of times what I do is I keep Ben and the town crier, as I said, separate. So they're almost separate people to me. So much so that my sister once, she asked me, well, you do realize you are the town crier, right? Because I would talk about town crier as the town crier. Oh, the town crier has an event. The town crier has it. Like, people like, you have an event. Like, yeah, but it's not really me. It's
a third person. It's third person.
It's the other. So, because that's just one way of thinking about it for me is when I put on the uniform, I am the town crier.
Their Venn diagram is almost two separate circles. Yes, there's one little like
they come together. So there have been events where people from work have come, or for walking in parade, I'll see people on the side. I'm like, oh hey, They think it's neat when they tell people, oh, I know the town crier, and they're like, really? How do you know the town crier? Oh, he works, So it's.
So what is, in that sort of vein, what is something you wish more people knew about Alexandria's history, as someone who's a purveyor of Alexandria's past?
Yeah, I just think it's such a rich history. It's such, and it's not always what you think it's going to be, right? Because you think, oh, Alexandria, it's in Virginia. Virginia's history is this. So Alexandria is probably, XYZ. Yeah. And you realize, well, no, it's not, because Alexandria being close to Washington, D.C., but separate from it, but then it was a part of it, and then it wasn't a part of it, so that changes the laws that Alexandria had. So especially when it comes to African Americans and slavery and education for blacks and all that, it changed many times. So Alexandria had this really large free population, but it was also one of the biggest slave trading ports with Natchez, Mississippi on the East Coast. So it's like, that's so weird. It's got a juxtaposition there. And I think I always want people to understand the breadth of the history. And then for the fact to say that I am the second black town crier that Alexandria's had. The first one was in 1813 or something like that. Little things like that, little nuggets like that. So that's kind of the things that's actually the reason why I had the tour on the pedicabs, because it was like, just walking around, you see all these really cool things, and you're like, oh, I wonder what that is. The drain pipe that says Alexandria, D.C. on it. Like, oh, someone put stamped a typo in cast iron. Like, no, that was part of it. And why Washington, D.C. isn't a diamond anymore, and all those things. So I thought, hey, if I'm people walking around seeing these things, but if they're just being ridden around and then someone's telling them about that, that's really exciting. And it's just the kind of the nitty gritty little things. And so that's what I always like people to understand about Alexandria. And it's not just suburban DC. It has its distinct own character.
Alexandria has such a unique kind of nuance, I think, and that the layers of the past come together in an interesting way here, and that Alexandria is also more than Old Town. That I think that's something people are starting to appreciate more now, is that Alexandria is also the West End and Chiralagua, and it is a many flavored thing. I appreciate that also as a museum educator as well. It's that is a common thing we're sharing is part of we're our own thing in this sort of larger network. Awesome. So what advice do you have for people who maybe aren't historians or didn't study history but want to get involved in public history and want to sort of get a taste of what this is like?
What I would do is just, kind of just learn about where you are, or the place you want to go, and just kind of learn about that and find all those little cool nuggets. And then you will find yourself saying, oh, hey, did you know, to someone else? And that's the start. You're now educating people about that thing. And I think that is, the fun of it. And maybe even go into a school and talking about something to school children, because they ask really cool questions, and they will, ask you why this happens or why, whatever that nugget of information is. And that's a start. And I guess that's my advice would be to do that and just kind of always keep learning about something and just kind of, because once you find one little thing and then you start stitching that story together, then you have this, you just keep going and it keeps going.
So tell us a little bit about the history of the position that is Alexandria's town crier.
Sure. So, of course, Alexandria being an East Coast town, had a town crier back in its history. And we know a little bit about them because they were in the city directory. But the problem is they, unless they were the town crier, that's all they did. They were their name, their occupation, and then it was like, oh, and also town crier. Because the town crier was just kind of, it was a thing that was there to help mostly illiterate population know about what the government was doing. So it was kind of like, okay, I'll do that. But I'm also a merchant or whatever. So we know a little bit about that. And so being the second Black town crier, the first one was Peter Logan in 18 13, 14, 15. And if you look at the city directory, it had him, and he was a merchant. So he ran a business, but he did some of the things that I do. Like this weekend is tree lighting. So, I'll welcome the crowd to the tree lighting. He did those type of things. And then I'm not sure if he actually helped light it, but he led parades, and he did also, because the only prerequisite to being a town crier is he had to know how to read. So that's where Alexandria's history with educating Blacks comes in, because you had a population at the turn of the 17 to 1800s. You had a population of Blacks who could read, because it was part of DC, and you could educate African Americans. So you kind of lose that history because of two things. One, education, and people began to be able to read on their own. So they didn't need a town crier to tell them what City Hall was doing. And then you also had, it was a position that people did probably not their sole job. And so it was whether or not it actually made it into the city directory that their town crier. So you kind of lose the thread. And so you don't know if Alexandria didn't have a town crier, or it just, they just didn't talk about it. I assume, but in 1976,
well, 200-year schedule.
whatever. Yeah, I'd say, Alexandria, didn't really have a town crier anymore, but there was a docent at Gadsby's. They were doing something at Gadsby's, and someone said, I wish we had a town crier to go out to Market Square during the farmer's market and announce this. And the story goes, he said, oh, you do now. And he went down to the collection, got on period clothes, went out, and he was I think he's a former military person, so he had a very deep voice and commanding presence. And he went out and he announced the open house or the tour special or whatever it was. And then that started, and he served for like 20 years.
Wow.
And then, yeah, it's really neat. It's really exciting to connect those dots and that history together, especially in Alexandria with, kind of being, if there is ever a role of town criers, a list of them, my name will be on there. And it's like, oh, that's me.
Part of the story.
I'm part of the story. And that's, someone asked me that. They said, do you think it's cool that you're part of Alexandria's history as you talk about Alexandria's history? I'm like, yeah, it's almost like talking about the brain, thinking about the brain. It's
history all the way down.
history all the way down, yeah.
That's so awesome. That sort of ceremonial, but educational, just different kinds of education.
Yeah.
What you need, what's the need to know, and what's the fun to know now. Oh, yeah, thank you. And then, so I would love to ask you about some of your equipment that you've brought.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about.
Yeah, well, all right. So this contraption, I made this bell holster and scroll holster. I made the scroll too, mainly because I thought putting the bell down after on the ground seemed kind of disrespectful. So I made this thing.
Flag.
Yeah. So I made this thing that did, I wear it on the side and it's strapped across my chest, and then I just put a little holder for the scroll, and I put my cries in here. This is the Alexandria seal.
Nice.
Yeah. All official like. But I just put that there so I have my hands free. I can ring the bell, and then I can put the bell down, holster the bell, and then pull out the scroll and read that. So, yeah. And I found out when I was at the competition that this is called a baldric.
A baldric.
Yes. And I was like, I did not know that. This is a baldric. So, yeah. So there's that. And then I just brought my hat and my glasses. So this is just, normal tricorn hat. And I decided, like a lot of people at the competition they have the feathers, and they were, I just think Alexandria is more simple. So I just have
Sophisticated.
Yeah. That's this is just the hat I have. And then these are the town crier glasses that are the kind of period glasses. And yeah. And these are my prescriptions, so I can actually see somewhat.
Fashion and function.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, I just brought these just to, kind of show you a little bit of but it's a whole thing. Put on the uniform and everything, and then put the glasses on and put the baldric on, and it's like, that's the town crier.
You've gone from Ben to town crier. You've made that switch. The sort of existential question to leave us with is what does public history mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, public history, I think, it's that learning, right? It's learning about where you are. It's learning about the space. And I think it's something that never quite ends, right? Because you always can learn something new. And I don't think anyone could, it's like finding the end of the internet, right? I don't think you can do that, right? But you just kind of find little things, and then there's always another story to explore. There's always another something to look at, and then you find, oh, this is really cool. Now I got to share this with somebody, or I just do this. So that's the fun part, and I think that's the, when you're doing it for the public, in the public, it is that edutainment. It's that performance, performance art, really. I mean, yes, you were just telling that story, and it's just a lot of fun, and it's fun to learn these things, and it's fun to see people's reaction when you tell them something.
or especially you're showing them something. They're like, oh, did you know this? Like at Gatsby. So you're like, you go through that scene in any of the rooms, and you're like, yes, did you know this is this, and people are like, oh, that's interesting, and you just kind of imagine, have them imagine something, and so you could take them back, and I think that part, when you're really showing the public about a space or an area or a time period, I mean, I think that's the part that is just really exciting to do, and it's it's just fun.